Hey everybody, I'm Amanda with DevExpress and I am here with Gregory. Gregory, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, thanks. How about you?
I'm okay. So we are going to be talking about DevExtreme and integrating OpenAI and LangChain. And what else are we going to be looking at?
Well, today what I thought we would do is sort of have some fun and get into our next release. And with our next release, we're going to be focusing a little bit on AI as it is sort of the new trend in the industry, of course. And
Yes.
we're going to be using some AI integrations in some of our components and a number of our product lines. And on my screen here, we have a blog post that describes a lot of our new AI enhancements. And this blog post will be linked in the description of this video, so you can go ahead and check it out. And so today, what I thought we would do is use DevExtreme and create a React front end that connects to a Python backend that uses OpenAI and LangChain, as you said, Amanda. And this will sort of be a fun little project that segues nicely into our next release when that comes out. And we will revisit a lot of this AI stuff when that happens. And so I'm going to go ahead and jump to my terminal here. And I've already created a brand new React project. I've described how to do that in the past with DevExtreme as well. So if anyone is curious about that, you can check out some of our earlier videos. But for today, I just set it up already, emptied it out, cleaned up all the boilerplate code. So we have a nice clean project to start. And as you can see here, I am using our Fluent Blue Dark CSS file here. So it's going to have that nice pre-styled theme as with any DevExtreme project. And so I'll go ahead and get started with our front end here. And first and foremost, we just have a simple app component here and just get started on this. And to start in this div, I'm going to give it a class name of main section, just like that. I'm going to delete where it says app, open this up. I'm going to add a h2 that says JSON file uploader AI chat, just like this. And now I'm going to go ahead and jump to the top and import a few things, which I will just copy and paste just because it will make it easier for us. So I'm going to say import file uploader and file uploader types from DevExtreme React / file uploader. And down here, I'm going to go ahead and start setting up our file uploader. So our file uploader component, which we have used in the past, is just going to say, and Copilot decided to go a little haywire there. So I'm going to say accept. So this is what file type we are going to accept. And I'm going to say application / JSON. For the upload mode, I'm going to say use form. So the upload mode for our file uploader is just how it's going to be uploaded. We can use a few different upload methods. For use form, essentially we can act as though we're using a form. If we were using a ASP.NET backend, we could use the provided package that we have that handles file uploaders in the front end. So essentially it makes it a little bit easier. And we can have, as Copilot is showing us there, just a simple upload URL. However, the way I'm going to be doing this is, since I'm going to be using a Python backend, I'm going to be doing it manually. And so we can see how that works as well. So I'm going to say ready to upload message. And I'm going to say file uploaded. So this is just going to say, once the file is in our front end, I'm just going to say file uploaded, just to make it nice and clean. And we'll see in a second why I'm doing this, because I'm not technically uploading a file from the uploader. I'm just taking it into the front end and getting it out manually myself. I'm going to say select button text is submit JSON, and on value changed is going to be on value changed, just like that. And I am going to go ahead and just create this function. I'm just going to leave it empty for now, just so it doesn't bother us. And actually, I'll just log that just so we can see it. And I'll jump back to our app here. And as we can see, we have this uploader here. So we can just go ahead and try that out. And I'll just upload a file. And as we can see, we have this text that says file uploaded down here, which is what I set. Otherwise, it would be our default text, which obviously I don't want. I'd rather customize it. And also, just to note, we do support drag and drop functionality. So it says, you can just drag a file here. That works as well. And in the right-hand side, it says the size, which is just 11 kilobytes. This is a relatively small file. And so that's about it for our file uploader. So we'll go ahead and jump back to our code now and continue on now that we have that file uploader set up. And what I'm going to go ahead and do first is set up this onValueChanged function. But before that, I'm going to import React from React as well as useState. I put this in the wrong place, but that's okay. Fix that. And under the function declaration, I'm going to go ahead and create some state variables. And this type that it's suggested for me is incorrect, and it should be unknown. And the reason why it's unknown is when I submit my JSON, it's going to save it in the state variable. However, it's impossible to know the structure of the data because the user is uploading the data, so it has to be an unknown type. Otherwise, it would cause a type error. Eventually, we will figure out the type, but ultimately, this is how we have to start. So I'll just clean up the lines there. After this, I'm going to say columns and set columns, which is a string array type. And I'm going to say const form data equals react.useRef, and it's going to be a question object, just like this. And I apologize for the pop-ups and little errors that, just warnings there. I will take care of those soon, of course. And yeah, just saying, I haven't assigned a value, and it's just a little annoying.
You understand what it's telling you, and you're going to fix it.
Yeah, of course. It's just one of those things we got to deal with for a second.
Right.
And in here, for this onValueChange function, I'm going to say an event, and the type of this parameter here is going to be file uploader types dot value changed event. And I'll go ahead and get rid of that log statement there. And I'm just going to start with an if statement here. If e.value, so if it just exists, I'm going to say const file equals e.value 0. So it's just going to be the first value there, which will be our file. I'm going to say const reader equals new file reader. And this is just, standard JavaScript stuff. Say reader.onload. And the type here is going to be a progress event file reader. I'm going to open those braces there. And I'm going to create a try catch block here with a variable called result set to event.target.result. And target, we have to have that question mark there.
Why a question mark?
And it's just because it's nullable, just to prevent type errors. If we were just using regular JavaScript and not TypeScript, we wouldn't need to do that. It would just try to find it. Otherwise, it wouldn't. You just wouldn't care. I mean, we don't actually have to add it here either. It just it's kind of for housekeeping.
Okay.
And I'm gonna have another if statement here, and it's gonna take in that result and say if it exists. I'm gonna say parse JSON equals JSON.parse result.toString, just like that. And I'm gonna say JSON, set that JSON state variable to the parsed JSON there. And after this, what I'm going to do is have another if statement where it says array.isArray parse JSON. So just another check there. And parse JSON.length is greater than 0. And if it is, I'm going to set the column to the object keys of the parse JSON array there. So basically, we're just going to check if it's an array. If it is, and the length is greater than 0, we're going to set the columns, which is again a state variable. And we're going to need that because we are going to be using a data grid to store it, to display this data on our web page after we upload it. So after this,
DevExpress data grid, yeah.
After this if statement here, I'm just going to add a comment called send to API with the parse JSON. So eventually I'm going to create this function called send to API, but I'm going to add the catch block now, and we will just log the error if there is one. And we should be all set so far. And at the bottom here, below the reader, I am going to say reader.read as text and the file, which we're just going to pass in. Now it looks like all of our errors are gone, so we should be good to go. And so now we can get started on our data grid. I am going to go ahead and copy and paste our import here. So we're going to be needing our data grid, of course, group panel, scrolling, search panel, column, and paging. And these are all things we have covered in the past, so I won't go through them again. And they are all displayed in our demos on our website. And so I'll go ahead and get started on our data grid. But what we don't want is for there to be a empty grid on the page. I just don't think it looks very good to have a empty grid.
Right.
So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit of logic here. So I'm going to say array dot is array JSON, and in here we can go ahead and add our data grid. So essentially what we're going to do here is if this JSON state variable is an array, then we're going to display the grid, otherwise we just won't. And this is just some basic React. And I will go ahead and get started with the data grid. So I'm going to say ID. I'm just going to add a simple ID. This, of course, is just for styling purposes, but I think it's good practice just to do it. And the data source is going to be that JSON state variable. I'm going to say column auto width is true, just so our data is nicely on the page. I'm going to say show row lines is true, and show column lines is also true, just because by default they don't show with our Fluent Design theme. So I thought this just is a little bit easier to see and hopefully easier to read on the video.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say show borders is also true, and the height, I'm just going to set it manually to 500. And I'm going to say allow column reordering is also going to be true. And that will help us organize our data, of course. And I'm going to add another curly brace here and say columns.map with a parameter of column. Add our arrow function here. Add a paren here. Open that up. And it looks like Copilot has already got it for me. So I'm simply going to add our data grid columns here by mapping them rather than adding them one by one. And normally I do add them one by one just so it's easier to read and understand. However, in this case, because we don't know what the structure of the data coming in is going to be, like I mentioned before, it's the only way to really handle it is to map it or just to do it randomly. But I find this better just if we need to add more logic and things of that nature. So I just decided to show how we would do that there. Down here, I'm going to add the group panel with a visible of true, scrolling with the scrolling mode as virtual. So this is just virtual scrolling within our grid, so it won't extend beyond the size of the page. It just looks a lot better and is easier to navigate and use, and we'll see how that looks in a second. I'm going to add our search panel, and I'm going to say paging enabled is going to be false. And I'm just doing this to ensure that our grid won't have pages so that the virtual scrolling will won't be interfered with in any way by the grid just having pages. And so now if I go to our app and I upload some sample data, we can see that our grid is here. And of course, like I mentioned, if I just refresh, we don't have the grid until I actually upload the data. And I just have some sample sales data here. And as we can see, the scrolling is done virtually. So the page itself isn't scrolling, the grid is scrolling. So if I scroll vertically, there's not that many columns here, so it fits on the page. However, it would extend past. And like I mentioned, I set the column reordering properties, added, and if I just simply make the screen smaller, like this, we can scroll down. If I scroll the page down so we could see the virtual scroll bar, we can scroll across just like this.
Nice.
So that's a nice feature of our grid. Of course, we have the search panel here and the group panel. So if I group by region, we can see that the grid is grouped just like this. And so that's a very nice feature. Again, we've gone over that before in greater detail, but I thought I'd just throw that in there just so we can see it again.
Such a nice feature.
Yeah, it's very nice, very easy to use, very helpful. It's definitely one of the favorites. Now what I'm going to do is, essentially, we've already got the grid working, the file uploading, all that stuff. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do is get started on our backend. And so I'm just going to go to another tab here.
What are you using for the backend again?
For the for the backend, I'm going to be using just a Python backend because, in the AI space, it's all Python. It's what everyone's using. And so I just thought I'd stick with that. You could probably use a JavaScript backend as well, or probably other languages, but Python, nice and easy to read. So I thought, most people know Python, so I figured I'd just use it. And so the first thing we need to get started with is, of course, installing our dependencies. And so the first thing I'm going to do is create a Python virtual environment here. And I just have an alias in my terminal where I just type in venv, so for virtual environment. And I'll just go ahead and hit enter and give that a second. And it just creates the virtual environment. So as we can see just there, the folder. And I believe the command, if you want to type it in manually, is Python -m venv, and then whatever the name of it. I just have it named as venv just for clarity. I just have an alias there to make it faster. And I'm also just going to go ahead and type in activate. So I go into that virtual environment. And as we can see, I have the venv in my terminal prompt. So I know I'm in there and it's activated. I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen. I will activate it also in this bottom terminal, which I'll use to just start my app. And now we're going to go ahead and install our dependencies. So I'm going to say pip install Flask, which is what we're going to be using for our API, Flask cores. So it'll just handle, cross-origin resources. Pandas, which is a very popular framework, of course.
Pandas?
Yeah, Pandas just for data science kind of stuff, data management. Python naming is definitely unique. And python.env is just so I can manage my environment variables. I obviously don't want to reveal my OpenAI API key, so I'll keep that off screen. And LangChain and LangChain-OpenAI. So these are the packages we're going to be needing. I'll go ahead and install all of those, and that should just take a couple seconds. And we'll go ahead and wait for that to install all of that into our virtual environment. And in case anyone's unaware, the virtual environment is nice, just like sort of any other project really. It just keeps everything contained so you don't install everything globally. But nonetheless, that's all set up. Again, we can just see we still just have that one folder. So I'm going to make a file called main.py and open that up in NeoVim. And up here, I'm going to go ahead and get started with our API. So I'm going to say import OS, import pandas as PD, import .env, or you know what, just to speed things up, I'll go ahead and just copy and paste this stuff just so we don't take too long. So it's going to be from .env, import load.env, going to be importing Flask, JSONify, and request from Flask cores, just cores. From langchain.schema, it's going to be human message and system message. From langchain core.prompts, it's going to be chat prompt template. And from langchain OpenAI, it's going to be chat OpenAI. And I'm using the recommended versions. A lot of stuff you'll see online in forums and stuff uses deprecated packages from LangChain. So this is all the modern stuff, so we won't get any warnings or errors or anything like that.
Why is it saying like is not accessed?
I just haven't used the packages yet. So it's just letting me know, because once you import it, if you don't use it, it's just a waste. So it's just like trying to be helpful. Like, it doesn't really matter. It won't cause any problems. It's just trying to help me out.
Cool.
So I'm going to say load.env. And so it's just going to load our environment variables up. I'm going to say OpenAI API key is os.getEnv. And in my .env file, it's just called OpenAI API key, just like this. So that's how we're going to get our API key. And LangChain will automatically sort of figure that out because it's been imported and it's named properly. We don't have to actually tell LangChain what it is, which is very handy. And so I'm just going to say if not open API key, and we'll just raise a error there. And I'm going to go ahead and initialize our Flask app. So I'm going to say app is equal to Flask and name. So it'll just be main. I'm going to set up cores and just pass in our app. Here, if you want to limit where the request can come from and so on, you could specify it there. I am obviously not going to do that for this demo. I'm going to create a variable called data storage, which is just going to be an empty dictionary. I'm going to say chat model is equal to chat OpenAI with a temperature of 0.5. And as we can see with Copilot, there are lots of options here that you can read in the documentation. I won't go through them. I'll just mention that the temperature is just how creative the chat model is going to be. By default, this is going to be using GPT 3.5 Turbo. However, we can specify other versions as well.
Oh, you can?
Yes. So you can just change it to say model is whatever you want.
Oh, okay.
But GPT 3.5 works just fine for our purposes here. And I'm going to go ahead and at the bottom here, I'm just going to add our if name is equal to main statement here. I'm not going to say debug is true. What I am going to say is host is equal to 0.0.0.0, just so it's exposed over the network here. And that looks fine. I don't know why it's complaining that it's not been closed there, the paren, but that is perfectly fine. And I'm going to go ahead and start creating our API. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy my first route here, and we'll go ahead and go through it. So this route is just going to be /upload. And of course, it's going to be a post request. And what it's going to do is take our JSON data that we send to it, do some error checking, create a pandas data frame here. It'll store it in our dictionary just as a as data as the key, and we just have some more error checking here, some exception, value error, that sort of thing. Ultimately, the only lines that are really relevant are this one and these two, and we're going to return a message that says data was uploaded successfully. So that's about it there, and this should work. So I'm going to try to start this app, and it looks like I have a small mistake there where I forgot to add my quotes. So that's fine.
Perhaps you forgot a comma.
Yep, exactly. And I'll start it up there. And what I want to see is if we can access this route. So I'm just going to use Postman to try out a request. And I already have it loaded up here. This is that same sales data file I've been using in our front end just to test. And I'll go ahead and send this request. And as we can see, we get this message that the data was uploaded successfully. So this is working just fine.
Right.
And so far this route is fine. So now I'm going to go ahead and get started on our next route, which is going to be our chat route. So basically our route that handles a chat. So I'm going to go ahead and copy a couple lines here, and I want to go through this a bit more slowly. So I'm going to start with a try block. I'm going to say JSON data is equal to request.get JSON, just like that. I'm going to say if JSON data is none, I'm going to return an error there. That looks correct. I'm going to say user message is equal to JSON data dot get message. So what we're going to send from our backend is the message, and we're simply just going to get that message out of our request body there. And again, have some error checking, which Copilot puts in there for me already. I'm going to say df data frame is equal to data storage.get data. And important to note is that I'm just going to be storing our data in memory here. Ultimately, if this was a more realistic app, we would obviously store it in a database, and it would be tied to a user account or something like that. But in this case, just for demonstration purposes, I'm just using just storing it in memory, and it of course just has a very similar effect as if we were just using a database. So there shouldn't be any differences there. I'm going to go ahead and say if df is none, return another error there. And I'm going to say response is equal to process query and pass in the user message and the data frame. And process query, I'm going to go ahead and create that function right now. But before I do that, I'll just create my return statement here. I'm going to say return JSONify response and the response and pass in 200 there. So my return type, of course, will be a successful return type. And I just decided to specify that myself in this case. And now I can go ahead and actually, I need to add that exception there because it's a try block. And after that, I can go ahead and create that function called process query. And I'm going to specify the types here. The query is going to be a string. The data frame is going to be pd.dataframe. And we are going to be returning a string there. And I'll go ahead and get started on this. So I'm going to say data string, which is going to be a string, is equal to df.toString, and index is false. And I'm going to kind of speed through a little bit of this. I don't really want to explain how data frames work and all that stuff, just because it's kind of beyond the scope of this video.
We only have so much time.
Yeah, it's obviously a very big topic, and all this AI stuff is quite complicated, but this is sort of just like a very gentle intro. And so I'm going to create a prompt template here, and this is going to be a chat prompt template from template, just like this. And this is going to say inside the parens template is equal to, and add triple quotes there, based on the following data. And I'm going to say data, please answer the following questions. So this is essentially what we're going to be sending to OpenAI. And this is essentially if you're just going to be typing into ChatGPT, this is just going to be the question. I'm just inserting the data directly in there. So whatever JSON we submit to our front end, it's just going to pop up in there, and we're going to ask a question. Of course, there's lots of issues with this, but I won't get into that right now. It's again just kind of beyond the scope of what we're talking about here.
Okay.
So after this, I'm going to say formatted prompt is equal to prompt template dot format. So this is again just the formatted string, and we're going to insert our data string, and the question is going to be the query. And of course, we're just getting that data from our data frame and from our query respectively. So now what we need to do is we need to define our system messages. So essentially what this is just so OpenAI knows what we want. So I just set a system message of you are a helpful data analyst. And the human message, of course, is going to be our formatted prompt. So this is just kind of what they call it. It's a little bit confusing. Essentially, the human message is what the user theoretically types in.
Huh. Oh, so me as the human, what I'm
Yeah,
typing
exactly.
into the, got it.
And I'm just going to go ahead and say response chat model dot invoke messages, and I'm going to return response dot content if is instance response dot content string else unexpected response from model. And so that again is just going to be a little error handling there. We can do it in a different way with exceptions, but this is nice and clean and easy. And basically the part where we use ChatGPT is just this one line right here, where we submit our messages array here, and our chat model, of course, is defined here, where I set this temperature, and it's going to be the chat OpenAI from LangChain. So
Okay.
that's about it. So I'll save that file. I will restart my API here. I'll go back to Postman's just so we can test it, make sure it works. I'll send that data again. I'll go to this other tab here. Hopefully this is big enough for everyone to read. I'm not exactly sure how to make this much bigger. And again, I'm going to be sending it to the chat endpoint that we just created. And I'm going to be adding it, sending a message of tell me some trends in the, let's just say, sales from North America, just like this. And I'll send that request. And as we see here, it worked and we get a response. So this is essentially what we got back from OpenAI after we sent them our data. Essentially, this is just what it came up with, of course. Not particularly interesting if anyone's used ChatGPT, but that's what's going on there. So now
Maybe you
back
need to
to,
up your creativity number.
yeah,
More
maybe.
interesting answer. You know what's funny is it's actually the font size is easy to read, but the color is what makes it hard for me.
Yeah, I don't know why they have this dark color. Let me see. Yeah, I have no idea how to change it, but whatever.
Yeah.
This is just to test it, just to make sure it's working, so it's fine. We'll see it better in our website. So to get
In our
back to our
version.
site, I'll just jump back to my React project here. And what's nice about this is we can, of course, integrate our nice front ends with a pretty cool idea for a backend. Again, a lot of people are trying out AI stuff and seeing what they can do with it, how it might fit into their projects. I thought this would be a nice and easy way to sort of jump into it and try it out.
Yeah.
So before we get back into it, I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste some more imports here, such as our form, simple item, button options from DevExtreme React /form, our pop-up from DevExtreme React /popup. I'm going to be importing our text area, our app.css file, and this file just has a couple of like padding things which I created beforehand just so it makes it a little bit easier to read for us. You can, if you want to see that exactly, then it'll be on GitHub in the description. And the load indicator here, also from the DevExtreme React package, which will have that nice little spinning wheel when we query our chatbot, and it'll, let us know that it's
So you know
thinking.
it's working.
Exactly. So now what I'm going to do is copy and paste a few more state variables here, 4 of them to be specific. So I'm going to have this one that says loading, other one upload success, chat response, and show pop-up. So most of these are Booleans. This one here, chat response, is going to be a string. This is just going to store the response we get from our backend, of course. So this is all fairly self-explanatory. I won't go too much into this. Anyone that's used React obviously knows that what state variables are. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to uncomment this send to API function, and I'm going to go ahead and create it now. So I'm going to say const send to API is equal to async JSON data, and again it's going to be an unknown type there. And I'm going to say try const response equals wait fetch http:// I'm going to add the IP address of the server here. Well, for most people, it would just be localhost, of course. Localhost port is going to be 5000/upload. Or open our curly braces, and It looks like Copilot got it there for us. So it's just going to be application JSON, and the body is going to be JSON.stringify and the JSON data up here. So essentially we're just going to take the JSON, send it into the API just like we did with Postman, but just in this case with the fetch API. So down here I'm just going to say if not response.ok. I'm going to say throw new error, failed to send data. That looks fine. Const data is await response.json. I'm going to say if response.ok, just like this. I'm going to say
is misspelled in that first.
Thank you.
That's what I'm best at, is spotting spelling errors.
I mean, I had lots of errors in that one. Yeah, my typing skills are kind of janky today. I'm going to say set upload success to true. So this is just going to say if we successfully upload our data. The way I'm going to do it is it's just going to try and upload it right when we add the file to the front end rather than having to click a button or something. I thought it just a little bit cleaner that way. And I'm just going to log our response from the API just like this and say data. And this is just going to say, you know, it was successful. That's all we're going to get back at this point here. And we're just going to log the error just like that. So this basically sets up sending the data to the API, so that first upload method. And so we can get started on our next section. And I'm just going to go all the way down below our data grid here. And I'm going to say another curly brace, upload success, and a paren there. And before Copilot starts throwing stuff at me, I will start writing it out myself. I'm just going to say div with a class name of AI input, just like that. Inside here, I'm going to create an H2, and it's going to say AI chat, just like that. Go and format that nicely there. Down here, I'm going to add an H4, just say ask a question. Below this, I'll add a line break, and below that, I'll start with our form. And what this is going to do is just show a form question that we want to ask to our chatbot, like we did in that example request that I just did. And the onSubmit function, I'm just going to call onSubmit. Again, very original naming. Here, I'm going to create my DevExpress form inside the HTML form, and I'm going to add my form data ref, which I created earlier. I'm going to say form data.current, show required mark is true, and label mode is going to be hidden because I'm just going to have a placeholder in our text field. So this makes it look a little bit cleaner. And I'm going to add a simple item with the data field of question and an editor type of DX text area. And that looks correct, actually. However, I'm going to say text box options for the editor options. And I'm going to set this manually down below here, except I'm going to get rid of the width property that it suggested for me and add a placeholder of type your question here. That looks fine. And I'm going to make this height 140 instead of 100, and that should be pretty much correct there. And below my simple item here, I am going to add a button item, which I will copy and paste because I have shown essentially the same exact thing previously, where we have this button options, where we just have some simple options like width, height, and the type, which is just how it looks. In our documentation, you can see the different types of buttons we have. Use submit behavior is true. So essentially what it's going to do is this button is going to be essentially the submit button. And when it's clicked, it's going to fall back to the onSubmit function here in the form. And down here, I have this logic here for our load indicator. So if it's loading, so if the state variable, loading variable is true, then it's going to show the load indicator. Otherwise, it will show the text that says submit question with the ternary here. So this is, again, something I've shown before. So it's just a cool little thing that will, of course, make it look a lot nicer than if we didn't have that load indicator, where we just assume nothing was happening, of course, but the load indicator also will prevent us from accidentally clicking it twice, that sort of thing.
Right.
And so below this form here, or actually below the curly brace, I'm going to say pop-up. Visible is going to be show pop-up, so that's that other state variable I created. On hiding, this actually looks somewhat correct, however it isn't, so once again copy and paste to clean it up. And essentially this is just some simple options again with our DevExtreme pop-up component here. On hiding, I'm just obviously just going to flip the pop-up variable. Drag enabled is true, hide on outside click is true, show close button true, show title. The title I'm going to set to chat response, and of course we have the width and height. And inside the pop-up, I'm just going to create a div with the chat response state variable there, and that about does it for the pop-up. Now all we need to do is create this onSubmit function, so I'll go ahead and do that now. So for this onSubmit function, it's going to be relatively similar to the send to API function here. The big difference is we're obviously just going to make the request to a different place. And what we're going to have here is looks like it's getting it right, React.form event, create our arrow function here, e.prevent default, const message. I'm going to set this manually, so it's going to be a object where the message is going to be set to form data.current.question, just like it is suggesting. I'm going to console log this just so we can see it in the console. I'm going to set that loading variable to true, so our load indicator will start working. I'm going to open my try block here, create my request body here, add the URL. Once again, I'm going to be port 5000, and it's going to be chat as the endpoint, and that looks correct. So we're just going to pass in the message there. Down here, I'm going to say if not response.ok, throw an error. Const chat response is going to be await response.json. So this is the response we're going to get back from the API, and I'll log that as well. I will go ahead and set the chat response. However, this is going to be chat response.response, not message. I'm going to say set show pop-up true, and I'm going to have our catch block here, and I will have a finally block as well where we set the loading indicator to false. So I'll go ahead and save that, and we should be all set.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and reload the page. I'll click on submit JSON. I'll once again use this sales data, and we can see that data is stuck in there. If we scroll down, we see this AI chat, and we can ask a question. So let's go with how many units were sold in Europe? Or let's say last year, because this says 2023. So let's see how this works. So let's just give it a second. We see the load indicator there, and now we have our response. So I'll zoom in so we can see it, and this is our response from our backend, which again comes from OpenAI. And
nice.
of course, everyone can read this, but this is pretty cool. So of course, it goes through our data, looks at it, gives a response. So it can be used in multiple different ways. I have another file here that I thought we would try. So this is the pitching statistics for Clayton Kershaw. Obviously, since we're in Los Angeles, I am a Dodgers fan. Yeah, so I figured why not. And as we can see here, there's a lot of different statistics, obviously all the pitching stuff. As we can see, the ERA here. So I'll go ahead and ask a question here. So I'm going to say, tell me some trends about the ERA statistics. And we'll try that out.
It's working.
And that's working as well. And so, despite the fluctuations, the player has maintained a relatively low ERA, which is true. So, that's nice. So it says in 2014 it was the best.
That's so nice for him.
Yeah. And so that's a pretty cool little demo there.
That is cool.
Yeah, so just to close up here, this essentially covers a very basic sort of intro to how to use some of our JavaScript components with sort of a chat kind of thing.
Yeah.
I thought it'd be nice to, sort of have a bit of a first look at what's to come with our next release. And of course, like I mentioned at the beginning, we are going to be using a lot more AI integrations going forward. So I thought we would just
start here.
See what we can do at this point. And so,
yeah, I mean, you could upload any data into that, right? And
yeah, as long as it's JSON, anything will work. We can also theoretically have CSV files and just convert it. And I mean, theoretically, we can use just files themselves and pass that along rather than JSON. But with JSON, everything becomes much easier when it comes to the web. So,
sure.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. And that is it for this one. Gregory, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Amanda.
Awesome. And we will see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.